All right, thank you for your patience, everyone. So for everyone that just kind of rolled in that past couple minutes, welcome to the RelSci Workshop. I am not your account manager. My name's Jeremy Newman, and as you all very well know, Tara sent out an invite recently. I run my own kind of series of webinars. It's slightly different than Tara's, so we thought it might be a good idea to kind of, I do my webinar for her accounts, and she does hers for mine. So it's kind of an exclusive webinar. We may do this in the future, depending on your feedback. So thank you for registering and attending the workshop. So what is this workshop? What's it about? This webinar was actually created because of feedback from my users and other users that wanted a more detailed and hands-on webinar. So I'll be answering questions that were submitted by users, my own users, as well as some that are on today's webinar. I'll be answering questions that are historical, that users have asked from past webinars or even further in the past, a year or 2 years ago. And I'll be answering all these questions live. So what this means is most of these questions I haven't seen before, I haven't tried to answer, I don't have a pre-canned answer for them. So I'll be walking through them step by step. You can walk through them with me. If you need more detail, if I'm not explaining it enough, just write in the question module, say, can you explain a little more? Or you can ask any questions of your own, and I'll get around to them as fast as I can. A few other things before we start. So if there's any technical issues, so if my sound cuts out, if the screen starts lagging, or I cut out for some reason, just let me know in the question module. I'll try to fix any problem as soon as possible, maybe get a new audio source, or try it on another computer. Alright, so before we begin the workshop, 3 things I always like to mention. We are not social media, so no one will ever receive a friend request or be alerted if you follow someone for news, or if you load in a prospect list or portfolio list. We do not contain any user-generated data, so no LinkedIn, no Facebook. Everything must come from a publicly verifiable source or from one of our third-party data vendors, such as FactSet, GuideStar, Morningstar, iWave, and many more. Number 3, currently we don't give out contact information. However, as a caveat, now that we have to say this, we are working on implementing contact information into the platform. So we're working with Dun & Bradstreet to implement their contact data into RelSci, and me and Tara will keep you all apprised of that situation moving forward. I think we hope to have it implemented by early next year. Alright, so before we get into some of the questions, there's a couple things I do like to go over that I get a lot of questions on. One is just uploading relationships. How do you go about doing it? And number 2 is uploading lists. So for uploading relationships, and pardon me, everyone that kind of knows how to do this, you come in here, and everyone should be able to see my screen, go to My Relationships, and this is if you're a for-profit. So, loading in your own Rolodex, this is how you go about doing it. If you're a non-profit and you have a central account, it's slightly different. The first step is different, that's all. You'd come to this gray bar at the top here that you should have, click it, and then come down and go to your account, the account that you have, that you're an admin for. And go in there, and then you load the relationships on behalf of those individuals, or the central account. So I come in here to My Relationships, click Add More Relationships here, and these are all the various options that we give you to load in relationships. So Outlook, really easy way. If you're a for-profit mobile app, we have an iOS and Android. You can sync contacts from your phone as well as use RelSci on the go. That's very popular actually with some of our legal clients that commute on the bus or via train to pull up news in the morning. LinkedIn. And with LinkedIn, the one thing I do like to say, I'll kind of get around to saying it, is it's very easy to do this. You click here. If you're already signed into LinkedIn, it brings you right to the page. You can export the file. As a note though, you have to change the headers in the file it gives you before uploading it to RelSci. Just as a small caveat. Salesforce, Gmail, and then CSV, which is what I'll be going over real fast. So there's a template you can download here. However, we only require 2 types of information to make an automatic match. So number 1 is name info. So this could be a column of first name and last name, or it could be a column titled full name. Either one will work. You can include middle name, you can include surname. And we also need some type of company info. So this could be a company name, it could be prior, current, it could be a board affiliation. Or if you don't have that, we can also use or in addition to, we can use email address. So we pull the domain and we pull the company name from that domain. So my email is jnewman@relsci.com. The platform to pull at RelSci.com, realize that's Relationship Science LLC, that'd be my company. Pretty simple. So I'm going to pull up a quick file of what it looks like. So hopefully everyone can see that. Very simple. Has full name, company. And the big thing is the headers should be in the first row and there should be no extraneous information at the very bottom of the page. So sometimes with Salesforce and Dynamics and other CRM systems, you get some very odd footers, and that can mess up the system. And then what you do is you go here, come into where that file is stored, and then load it in. A few things of note: saving it as a CSV helps, gets rid of any formatting, so no errors show. So you usually do that. And it'll queue the file and process the contacts. A few things that a lot of people actually don't know here is one of the big concerns that nonprofits have, and even for-profits, is, hey, I have a contact that does not have company affiliation. Will it match? Like, how do I get to match? I really want to include them. There's automatic matches, so you might have a file of 200 people, individuals, and let's say 100 match. And let's say 50 don't match at all. But then there's 50 that are kind of floating there, and you're like, well, okay, where are those 50? So what ends up happening here is there's this tab called Potentials. And what potentials are is, if RelSci is not 100% sure about a match, but 90% sure, 85, it'll go here in Potentials. So if you click on this tab, it'll actually pull up all the individuals that RelSci thinks maybe there's a match in the system. We just don't want to give you a false positive because that's more harmful than just giving you a false negative. So come here, and in some cases, maybe a symbol didn't import properly. That happens a lot with, people that are from foreign countries, from Eastern Asia, from South America. I've seen that happen a lot. You have to come in here and kind of correct that. Come down. You can kind of go through here and take a look and say, oh, this is correct. Like, obviously, China Fortune Land Holding, Fortune Land Holding. It looks like the same person. You can click add, and then it gets added to your relationships. Simple. So that's a great way, and we don't expect you, if you do a file upload and there's like 1,000 potentials, we do not expect you to go through all of them at once. We'll go through them with you, and we can help you. Tara can help you. But you can pop in here. They don't disappear. You can pop in here whenever you have 5 or 10 minutes and add those relationships to your relationship capital. Very simple. So relationships are where you put the door openers, board members, trustees, your Rolodex. Lists. I always like to push lists. All of my clients will tell you, if you ever talk to them, I talk endlessly about lists. And for good reason. They are very powerful in RelSci, and a lot of people don't use them to the fullest potential. So lists are where you can bucket or segment any type of information you want. So you can segment a list of individuals, or a list of companies, or a list of individuals and companies. And what's great here is you can use put prospects here, which is smart because you don't want to load prospects or targets into your relationships. You don't want to leverage your prospects to get to your prospects. That makes no sense. But besides even putting in companies or individuals that you want to get at, you can put in companies and maybe foundations that you have really good relationships with. You can also take your relationships and segment them out. Like, hey, I want to actually drill down on how our board of trustees can get us in front of maybe our prospect list, or the top foundations we want to have touch points into. So that way, instead of going from, in this case, 4,000 relationships, it's going to go from a subset of that. You're parsing out the data, and that can be useful. So okay, what does the process look like in regards to loading in lists? It's very similar to a relationship upload process. However, there's a few things you can do in addition to that. So I'm actually going to pull up an example file I have. And you'll notice it's very, very similar. Actually, it's pretty much the same file. However, I've added another column here. And a lot of people don't realize you can actually add information, your own proprietary information, into a list and include it in RelSci. Sometimes this is very useful. So for instance, you can load in like a tier. Say, okay, this is our targeting tier, SMB, mid, large, enterprise. You can load in constituent IDs, maybe what officers assigned to them, gift officer, or what portfolio managers assigned to them. It can be very useful, so you don't have to hop between two platforms for a workflow. So you can do this, CSV, just the same file, and then the process here, hit upload file to list, hit choose file, choose that file, hit upload, and this is the kind of the list upload screen. Some of you are probably very familiar with this, so you can add it to an existing list if you want, if you're updating one, or you can create a brand new one. And the standard fields you will always see is name and description. However, if you go over here, you'll see these other options. So uploaded fields, these are the fields we uploaded right here. Full name, company, and tier. Click it, it's now included in the list. Another cool thing you can do is most of you will have the custom field capability enabled. If you've been a client for a while, it wasn't standard. It was actually implemented about 6 months ago, so you may not have it in your account. If not, just shoot Tara an email. She can enable it real fast, no additional cost. What it does is it allows you to create fields in RelSci internally without importing information. Come here and be like, okay, I want free text. I want to take notes on the prospects. Or I want a checkbox. I'm going to do some cold calls or maybe some lukewarm emails, and I want to check off the people that I've emailed. Or drop-down menu, which is my favorite. If you're hosting, let's say, an event, a gala, or let's say you're going to a golf tournament, whatever it may be, or inviting individuals to a golfing tournament, hit it, edit drop-down, and let's say we have 3 options. We'll say, attending, no response, and declined. And we hit save. And then hit save and continue. Now it's a very similar process to relationship uploading. You'll have the automatic matches, which some people always ask, do I have to go through and confirm all these automatic matches? No, you can if you wish, but usually RelSci is very good at matching things accurately. Hit save and continue. The one difference, the biggest difference here from relationships to lists is potentials, these possible matches, don't stick around. They disappear. So unlike relationships where there's a tab for them, this disappears. So in this case, what you can do is come through here and confirm the possibles. Do it all at once. I will tell you tricks in case you have a lot of possibles. So in this case, there's 1-to-1 matches here. Especially with these unique names, most likely these are the people we're talking about. Corporación, Government of Georgia. You can come down here and kind of confirm everyone. But let's say you don't have a lot of time. You don't want to, sit here for half an hour and confirm 100 possibles. You just want the lowest hanging fruit for your list. Or you just want it in the system right now and come back to it later. There's a way to get these possibles again, and I'll show you how. So we'll hit save and finish, and now the list is created. We'll hit view list, and here's the list, and there's the 843, including those possibles we clicked. However, let's say you have time now. Let's say you have some free time. It's like 4 o'clock. Nothing's really going on. You can hit upload file to list again and upload that same file you just loaded into the list. There will be no duplicates. RelSci is very good at making sure there's no duplicates included in lists or relationships. And then what will happen is there'll actually be possibles again. It'll be the same number of possibles, and then you can go through them then when you have some more time. So that's kind of a way around that. All right, so let's take a look at the list real fast. So here's the tier that we included in our file, and this is editable. So let's say, this changes from small to mid. We can change that. Custom field here, so a lot of nonprofits like this. So you can come in here and we have that drop down. Click this and be like, this is great if you have a smaller list of 50 to 100 people. Say attending, no response, etc. And what's great is this information doesn't just stay in RelSci. So when you report out here, you can actually include that information. So there's not going to be a little section here of saying, hey, include the custom field or include tier, but it automatically exports. All right, so those are 2 basic things I wanted to cover. If you have more questions about lists or relationships specifically about the uploading process and potentials or match rates, right into the question module and I'll answer them. If you have questions about lists used in other tools, we'll probably cover that a little bit later as well. All right, so moving on to a couple questions. I do have a few questions written in from clients that are currently on the webinar. So thank you for writing in. I always appreciate that. And one of the questions, okay, this is actually very... So good question. Question is, if we don't have custom field available, can it be activated for our account, or is there an additional fee? So no fee. For pretty much everything I talk about today, there will be no fee. No additional fee. It's included with your subscription. If there is an additional fee, I will specifically mention that. But yeah, just shoot Tara an email, and you can even do it now, since I'm the one on the webinar, and she's, I think, at her desk still, and she can enable it for you real quickly. It might require you to log out and back in for it to be enabled, though, just as a heads up. All right, so the question comes in from a client on the webinar currently right now, prior to it actually starting. So how do you suppress a duplicate name on a path report? And so what they're getting at by this is a lot of times you'll see a path from person A to person A. And obviously that's a strong path. It's going to pop at the top because they're the same person. But, that's not always that. It's not great to know that all the time, and I'll get to how to suppress that. This is a good question. Are you able to add multiple custom fields? I believe so. You can actually add, I think there's just a general field limit of 5 or 6. I'll have to double check. It might be as high as 7. Definitely does not go over 7. So I'm almost positive if you get rid of the description field and just have name, you could have up to 4 or 5 custom fields. A lot of people like to import their own uploaded fields, if you will. All right, so this comes about, duplicate names on path reports come about for 2 reasons. One is, sometimes it's useful, right? So sometimes you're going from a list of, let's say, corporations that you have strong relationships with to a list of foundations or corporations you want to have a strong relationship with. And then you find out, oh, hey, James Jones here actually sits on the board of both of these companies. That's good information to know, and that's a good path to look at. That's a good path to see. However, when it's not so good is a great use case when, let's say, you're hosting an event and you upload a list, for instance. So here are some lists that I have uploaded here. And we want to see, so let's pretend for now that this CFO prospect list is actually not a CFO prospect list. So let's call this attendee list. So this is our attendee list for an event, for golf tournament, professional development event. And we want to see how those attendees are connected to each other. So in this case, we're going to go from attendee list, and this is why lists are so powerful, one of the reasons, attendee list to attendee list. So this is looking at the connections between these individuals attending the events. Because sometimes what's useful is you take a look and say, okay, we have limited resources. I want to focus on someone that will pay off the most, the biggest return on our investment being time. So if you take a look and see who's the most connected, so, hey, John over here actually is connected to 30 of the attendees. He's the most connected. Let's really focus on him. That's good to know. But what ends up happening is you get a lot of obvious paths, and you'll see them pop up right here, where it's person connected to themselves. Well, this is useless for us right now because we know they're going to be connected to themselves. They're attendees. So the question is how to get rid of this. The easiest way to get rid of this is go into the filter option up here. So the filter at the top. Don't get it confused with the filters on the columns here. So filter up top, and then this option. So exclude direct connections to the same person. This is the option. Checkbox right here. And there's a lot of filters as you can see. So if you ever get weird Pathfinder results, check out this filter. option, and there's probably a way to do it. So for example, a lot of people like to remove connections through competitors or through their own organization to kind of get new ideas. Apply, and you'll get the paths that you're looking for. So who's connected to who, and you'll see that it's still not perfect because you have James Beer connected to Jeffrey and Jeffrey connected to James Beer. Obviously it's the same thing, but you now no longer have James Beer connected to James Beer. So it gives you a much more targeted list and how they're connected to each other. Alright, so another question came in. So the question is, when I search in Visit a City, the path reports on the main page are typically not accurate. It often shows on the main screen that there is no path, but then when I click on See All, it shows a variety of first or second degree paths that we actually have. Any suggestions? Alright, it's a good question. So Visit a City, for anyone that's not familiar, is a great tool if you have people that travel a lot, or if you yourself travel. As a quick overview, how it's useful, if I typed in New York City, for instance, where I'm located, and hit show people, what it will do is first it will pull up everyone we have profiled in New York City. That is not useful. What is useful is clicking over to my relationships and seeing 111 that I'm personally connected with. Obviously I'm not. This is a demo account. I wish I was connected to these individuals. It shows who your colleagues are connected with. So it's great to fill up time on a calendar. If meeting cancellation, or if you have a meeting at 8 in the morning and then one at 4 in the afternoon, you don't want to spend all that time sitting at Starbucks or doing whatever you can do in a city that you're visiting, depending where you are. So this is a great way to either plan for a trip or kind of do use your time wisely if you have a last minute cancellation. So the question is, when, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tasha, when you are on this page, either the main page here, or let's say extended here, that the My Shortest Path is incorrect. It's showing incorrect results. Okay. So what's happening is for everyone else that's maybe not understanding, is Tasha's, what she's doing is saying, oh, hey, we have it looks like we have a potential connection through John here to Brian. But then she'd click See All and then see, oh, hey, we actually have a direct connection. Or, hey, we don't have a connection to this individual. Click See All, we actually do have a connection. So it depends, and Tasha, this might be your account specific, but Visit a City, and this sometimes happens with Power Search occasionally too, is if you have what we call RelWeb enabled, it's a lot of time it's used primarily for nonprofits. It's kind of a different strategic account setup that uses public information or lists as relationships. That might be throwing off the My Shortest Path. So in which case, I advise you of two things. Either, shoot Tara an email, and maybe we can bring it to our tech team's attention. Maybe it's a bug on our end with specifically your account. Or in the meantime, in the interim, that's probably why, Tasha, do have RelWeb. RelWeb sometimes doesn't play nice with Visit a City and Power Search, I think specifically. It doesn't throw off the data. It doesn't give incorrect data for the results, but for pathing, it can get a little confusing. So in that case, definitely always click See All. That'll probably be the best. And I apologize. We're kind of working on fixing that currently. And if anyone has questions about RelWeb, I'd be happy to answer them. If you are very confused about it, just write in and I can give a quick overview. All right. In the meantime, all right, this is a good question. So, someone created a list from Power Search that has over 5,000 results, 5K results, that you'll see. And for instance, I'll pull up an example right now. If you type in any major city, for instance, or any very general criteria, and then hit search, what you'll see always happen is, in RelSci at least, we'll say 5,000 plus results or 5,001 plus results, something of that nature. And what's happening is, how do I get all 5,000 either exported? Are there additional results besides the 5,000? Why is there a limit of results? So there's multi parts to this answer, to this question. So we do limit reporting size. This is because we've had some individuals in the past that kind of have mined the data. However, that is not to say that we're not allowing you to download all the data. Just shoot, in this case, Tara, but even client support, an email saying, hey, we're trying to do this report for a campaign, or we're doing this report for a supervisor. He needs it by, the end of today, and I'd like access to, 1,000 of these results, or the 5,000, for instance. And most of the time, we'd be more than happy to oblige and kind of either pull the report for you or enable the capability to pull all the information. And that's just a kind of a compliance issue on our end, making sure that people don't number one, ping our server too much and report out a lot of information, because that will actually slow down all the other users' experience, and also just to make sure that they're not taking advantage of the data. A few other things about limitations. So 5,000 plus results. This does not mean, as the plus signifies, that there's only 5,000. There's probably more than 5,000. So in which case, if you can narrow it down, that actually will help with exporting. So narrow it down by city, or narrow it down by something that you can segment out by industry, and maybe pull multiple reports and then compile them together. That also goes with Pathfinder. This is kind of a good tip here. So Pathfinder is fantastic when you're going from one entity to another, an organization to an organization, an individual to an individual, your relationships to an individual, for instance. But Pathfinder does have a limit as well. So it does have a limit of 300 paths, and it's not, it just stops at 300. So we could pull more, but the thing is, it could go on and on and on, slow down the server for you, and maybe you get a gateway error, etc. So we cap it out at 300, and usually that's fine. The only time this is usually not fine is when you have two large lists. So let's say a list of 1,000 people to a list of like 5,000 people. You will not be getting all the paths possible. So sometimes you'll be like, well, this path isn't showing up. Like, if I run it this way, I get a lot of interesting paths, and then if I run it this way, I'm not getting all the details. So usually what I advise my clients to do in that case is, if you're doing two large lists, split up the lists. So if you have 1,000 and then a 10,000 person list, definitely kind of segment out those lists to get more detail. That's kind of all it comes down to. And usually, kind of a rule of thumb is lists from anywhere from 100 to 200, 300 individuals work perfectly fine if you're comparing it to another list. I mean, a lot of the time it's all about that low-hanging fruit, so it will kind of pull up some of the better paths towards the top. All right. So actually, before I continue on with some questions, I'm actually going to run a quick poll just to gauge interest and see maybe what questions I should pull from. Just asking what tool you're maybe interested in or want me to explain more. If it's something else besides these, let me know in the question module, and I can answer them. All right. So thank you for that. Before we touch upon the poll, actually Charles did send in a question. So the question is it possible to filter out connections based on strength? So remove weak connections, things of that nature. Yes, and there's two answers to this, two correct ways to do it. So number one is, if I went to, for instance, if I went to Melody Hobson's profile. So let's say Melody Hobson sits on our board, or you can go to a board member's profile, or maybe someone that you have a strong connection with, but you don't want to ask them who they know, etc. And you pull up their virtual Rolodex, so the 3,500 individuals we believe that she has access to. And pull up that by clicking See All in Relationship Summary. So here it's very simple to do. You can click filter, and then you can filter out the week or the average, include the average, and then hit apply. That's a simple way to do it. In Pathfinder, you can do it as well. So let's say I'm going to some prospects or a target list. And I want to pull, strong connections, for instance. There's a few ways you can do that. So as you can know, there's some filter options at the top here. If you look, that's where your eye might be drawn for strong, average, or weak, and that is correct. So what you can do here is don't click first degree, second degree, or top prospects. This is actually how you filter out roles or get current or prior for certain roles. So that's great if you're targeting some board members and you want the current ones. You actually click, it'll be under My RelWeb if you have RelWeb enabled, My Firm's Relationships here. And this is actually where you can kind of get rid of some weak, average, and strong connections that are on your side, your firm side. You can deselect sources or people that you don't want to use. So let's say I've asked Andrew a lot in the past 2 months for some help in introductions. Maybe I don't want to include him on pathing. You can do that. Sources is RelWeb related specifically. So if you have RelWeb and you have 5 lists of sources, you can remove specific lists as sources, which is useful too. A few other things you can do. Filter type, you can just filter out specific path types you're not interested in. So for instance, if you're a nonprofit and really aren't interested in transactional, private equity, or LP investment, you can do that. Or maybe you're a for-profit and you really want to drill down more on the corporate hierarchy, LP investments, transactional. We have legal clients that really just focus on transactional. Kind of works that way. And then the other big thing you can do is just click sort and do path strength. That's another great way to do it. Or number of degrees will be, first degree at the top, so direct paths, and then maybe the 1-hop paths and 2-hop paths at the bottom. All right, so on to the poll, and Tosh will get around to answering a question in a second. So the poll, so it looks like some people have a couple questions on Pathfinder, but primarily what people have questions on is Power Search came in second, and Discovery came in first, which is not surprising. So I can touch upon Discovery. What I usually say for Discovery is it's great to have either a one-on-one with Tara, or if you go to our YouTube channel, and for anyone that is not aware of the fact that we have a YouTube channel or how to get there, there's 2 ways to get there. One is you can just go to YouTube, type in relationship science, and it's one of the top picks. Also, this little thing on the right side that you might have seen hanging out will be being launched, hopefully by the end of this week, maybe even early next week. And what this will do is it's a kind of a help button. It'll be on the left side when it is released, and it kind of does flows. So for instance, if you have questions on, I forget, how do I update a list? You can click it, and what it will do is it'll actually go through a flow, a virtual flow of, this is how you do it step by step. So included in this help menu is, let's say you want some more training. There's actually an embedded link here, and you can click here and go to the YouTube channel as well. So that's another quick way to get to it. So in regards to training, I do have a Discovery webinar, a whole hour of me talking about just Discovery on our YouTube channel. I do host it occasionally. Maybe I'll talk to Tara and see if I can shoot it out to you guys as well. But I'll go over it briefly. So before I go over that briefly, and apologies for jumping around, I just want to make sure that I answer any questions that are related to past questions. So how to get rid of weak connections? Definitely, I can answer that one more time to sort out weak links. So if you're on a person's profile page, so Bill Gates, and you want to sort out his weak connections, you just click filter in his relationship summary. It's simple on that side, and then hit apply. For this though, let's say I'm going to that prospect list, for instance, or better example would be, let's say if someone in mind, let's say we do Bill Ackman. Pull this up. And we want to get rid of some weak connections. 2 ways to go about doing it. So you can filter here. For some people, this will work, not everyone. Besides that, you can click sort and do either path strength or number of degrees. So I guess I can elaborate on this more. When you do sort by this, number of degrees or path strength, so in this case, we don't have any direct connections, it looks like, to Bill Ackman. Those path strengths, path strength will actually put the best path at the top. And then another great tip I will actually show you about Pathfinder. So hopefully that answered your question about sorting. So if you sort and then kind of report it out as a CSV, it's very easy to just delete the weak paths, or you can select some strong paths when you hit report. So for instance, if I do report, I do CSV, I can just say I want to choose the paths to report. And that way, if you just want the top 10, top 5, maybe specific paths that you want to bring attention to your superior, or you just want to include for your use, you can do that. So I want to talk about what I call grouping. So some people, I have a lot of my clients actually talk to me about what are collapse paths. Like whenever you click report, this option always pops up. Include entity IDs, some of you will have. That's just RelSci's primary key. It's very useful if you're doing a lot of exporting from RelSci, then re-importing that list, and etc., etc. We have an internal ID capability, where you can match your internal ID from your CRM database to RelSci, so that way when you export reports, it pulls the internal identifier. And then include collapse paths. So people question, like, what is that? So collapse paths are this little option here, plus 22 more paths. So what this actually means is Steven here, we click, has 22 more connections to individuals on our list. So through Steven, we can get to Hamilton, we can get to Bennett, John, David. And this is sometimes useful to see who the best connector is, so that you make sure to use them for the highest value target. For instance, let's say like we used them on John here, on Jay, but we really should have used them with Hamilton or Bennett. This is when it's good to have this view. But what I always like to tell people is if you want the best path, the strongest path to a target, go to the grouping function and click the third option. And this works specifically with organizations and lists. What it will do is it'll actually put the best path at the top. So for instance, I have indicated that I know Julian directly, but if we hit plus 4 more paths, it'll actually show the other ways in which we can get to Julian. So it's a cool way to do it. All right, so hopefully, sorry for that little tangent, but hopefully I answered that question. So whenever thinking about filtering weak paths, either think the filter button or think sorting. That's the best way to go about doing it for now. All right, discovery. I won't take too long on this because, as I mentioned before, I have and can talk for hours about discovery. I'm quite the proponent of it. So a lot of people get intimidated by discovery. It's a big tool. It's at the very bottom of the right here, so either they don't know about it or it's not covered in general training. So discovery, what I usually say is kind of a macro version of Pathfinder, which in a way is true. So Pathfinder is taking a look at how you and your firm's relationships or your organizational relationships can get you in front of a target or a specific list of targets. Discovery is like that, but it's a lot more than just that as well. So don't just think of discovery as, okay, strategic tool. Think of it as strategic, but it's also useful in other ways. So what you can come in here is the standard view for the first module is taking a look at 4,132 relationships. And it's saying, okay, how do those break down by industry, by location, and by role? So I can come in here, click into industry. It actually pulls up a pie chart of, hey, who do we know investment services and portfolio management? Holding companies, private equity and venture capital. I can click into this and say, hey, these are the organizations we have potential connections to. We can see who we have access to over there. And for nonprofits that are really just interested in the major gift side, or even wealth managers that are like, I'm not interested in that, I'm just interested in people, click the People tab. And you have a list of individuals in this sector that you can maybe reach out to. So that's one quick example. What you can also do is, let's say, you're hosting an event. You go into location, and this is just with your firm's relationships. Say, hey, I'm hosting an event in Cleveland, for instance. And let's say you want to target all the board members you have access to, have some affiliation with Cleveland. You can then click filter and actually go down by role here and say, I just want board members, and filter that way. So it's another view of that. So it's like a top-down look, analytical look at how your web of relationships, how your firm's reach looks like from industry perspective, from a location perspective, by role. But it can do a lot more than that. Discovery. So first, this is just first degree. That's direct connections. You can do second degree. Word of warning, second degree are one hot pass. So it will say, okay, 4,000 individuals. Let's take a look at everyone they can get us in front of as well. So that'll be a lot of individuals depending on your firm's relationship count. In this case, it's probably going to be hundreds of thousands of individuals. So if you do click second degree relationships, just be prepared for a long loading wait. You can still use the platform while you wait for it to load, just it might take a few minutes. Another thing you can do, change the input. So you can make a list here, take a look and see what the reach is there. Or a great way to, a question that comes up a lot. Let's say you have a board member. So let's say Henry Kravis here. Select his profile. You can put in a list here. You can put in an organization. Hit apply. And what it does is we wait for it to load. And then we can drill down. Let's say Henry Kravis is an honoree at an event in New York. Or let's say we're in DC. And we can drill down by location saying, okay, Henry Kravis is an honoree. Let's reach out and see maybe who he knows, who we have connections to. Let's say he's a board member and we're hosting an event in DC. Let's make sure that we're not forgetting anyone that he has access to. So drill down here. Maybe if it's a larger event, try to find a corporate sponsor with connections there, or just click people and see who they have access to. So a few other ideas for this tool that people have been using it for. The coolest idea I've seen is actually from one of my clients. They've been clients with RelSci for a very long time. And what she did is she loaded in a list of all their investors, all of their board members, all of their C-suite, their underlying companies, hedge fund managers, private equity managers, etc. So she had a list of thousands of individuals that she then compiled into one master list in RelSci. And then load it into Discovery. And what that actually is doing for her is then it's saying, hey, these are the individuals you know, and this is who you have potential access to. So all the organizations, all the individuals, she even's doing second degree ones to see who they have access to. And she's using it as marketing material saying, hey, we have access to this many board members, this many founders. We have a large reach into the private equity sector, and we know this many individuals. So it's as if she got a Rolodex of each person at the underlying companies, the managers, board members, the investors, the C-suite, and put it all into one giant file, which would be nigh impossible, but Discovery lets you do that. The second module, there's a second module of Discovery. I won't take too long to explain it. This compares two sources of relationships. It's great for strategic stuff. Really good to see You can change here, it has missing relationships, so first degree, second, and no relationships. Great to see, hey, where do we need to cultivate some connections? You know, we have a list of foundations here, let's say 100, some, really philanthropic foundations, kind of our wish list. Okay, we have connections to 60 of them, but it looks like 40 we have no connections to. Let's try to cultivate some in there. All right, so that's discovery. Apologies that took a little longer than I expected, but as you can well imagine, I can talk about that forever. It's a very big tool. It's an awesome tool. It's very different than any other tool in RelSci. All right. So another question about donations. So specifically for nonprofit, is what RelSci displays as donations the extent of your database? We like to prospect based on donations, but this data seems to be very limited. What are you using as your source? All right, so for donation information, so let's say we pull up Melody Hobson. And scroll down to our donation information. So this is the donation information we have for Melody Hobson. So a few things. Where do we pull our data? So there's a few places we pull it from. One, from any public filings, from anything that we can confirm in this public sphere. So if there's a press release, if there's acknowledgement on maybe a nonprofit's website of congratulating someone that donated, then we will include that. But we get a lot of our data as well from iWave, from NOSA. I believe there's a few other data vendors as well, and we pump it into RelSci to here. The amount here is usually accurate in terms of the range. We don't want to give you a false positive again, so we do sometimes have a range. And actually, nonprofits in general of our clients have more access to some donation information, kind of unlinked donation information that a lot of our clients like to see. So in terms of where we get our data, we get it from a lot of third-party data vendors as well as anything that we can get publicly. In terms of being limited, some people have said it's limited. It does depend on the individual. So it's a great way to kind of get a background and see what they've donated to. In terms of the amount, I'll be frank and honest. Some people have mentioned that it's not as accurate as they wish. They wish it was a little more specific. But this is what we can do so far. I think there is also some contractual matters in terms of our data vendors that we have to comply with. But in terms of everything that we have being shown, as far as I'm aware, everything that we have in our database is being shown. And as always, if you do want to scrub, and for anyone else that's, let's say you want an updated dossier or want to create one, just click RelSci Services, Profile Requests and Data Errors, fill out name, company, URL, and details, and hit Submit. Goes right to our research team. It's unlimited, included with your subscription. Please use it as much as you wish. All right. So, getting to some other questions. All right, so this one's good. This comes from Johnny. So I saw this cool search in our demo where they found all these foundations that donated to the arts. I can't find foundation criteria anywhere though. So how can I recreate that search? How can I see paths, etc.? So this is a job for Power Search, and when you come into Power Search, click Organizations to search for organizations for foundations specifically. And it is not intuitive, but do not come here and then go to company type, because if you go to company type, you will notice there is no foundation criteria. We have nonprofit and school, membership organization, but no foundation information. Foundations are actually under cause. So if you come to cause here and type in foundation, you'll pull up this supergroup called Foundations. You click here, and now you can start drilling down into the foundation sector, saying, hey, I want to look at foundations that have donated to, let's say, Art and Culture Services, donated at least $1,000. Click search. It'll pull up a list of those foundations that you can then browse. In this case, it's 478. There's two ways to go about with Pathfinder here. Number one, you can use the See All button here, which in this case I'd actually recommend because there's so many. But let's say it was a smaller subset. So let's say we try to narrow that list down. So now we have 206. That's a little more reasonable. You can add to and make a list. And this is a thing I always tell clients to get comfortable with. Creating lists internally in RelSci, then using it in another tool is a very common flow. Whether you're going from donor search to power search to Pathfinder, whether you're going from investor search to Pathfinder, due diligence to power search to Pathfinder, it's a very common theme for that to happen. So kind of get used to doing it. And then if the lists start getting a little too cluttered, you can always delete some or ask us to delete a few. All right, okay, this is a great one. And this just covers power search in general and is great for profit and nonprofit in terms of just thought processes for RelSci. So this one's from Chris. How can I search for Republican donors? So this is actually a pretty common question, and what you would expect is you come down here and click donations, right? And then you show donors to, and you want to type in Republican, party, for instance, and you can do that. However, what a lot of people find, and you will find if you try this, is we have multiple parties profiled, and people have donated to specific parties. So the Alabama Republican Party, Arkansas, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, and it won't be categorized. It won't all be aggregated under Republican Party. So what you can do is you can maybe target multiple Republican parties, maybe target specific liberal parties. But usually what I like to recommend to clients is if they're looking for, especially if they're a nonprofit, not a political cause, if they are looking for people that have donated to, let's say, their cause, they'll go to donations and say, hey, I want people that come down here, maybe donate to education, for instance. Doesn't matter how much, but I also want people that we can have tagged as Republican Party. You can type in this. So that's one way. Do the same thing, maybe do it locally, target it that way. You can do it by age. Say, okay, target some, let's say target a certain age bracket that's associated with more left-leaning or right-leaning. But what I like to recommend is maybe look for individuals that are members of known conservative or known liberal or environmental organizations. So for instance, I've had clients that are targeting conservative individuals. They look for people that are members of the NRA. People look for members that are Greenpeace, etc. And that way you can kind of narrow down your potential target list, your prospect list. Another way to go about doing this, which can be useful for this, is loading in an external list of, let's say, conservative targets, known political party members, maybe activists, and then using this appears on field and typing in that list. So if I type in the prospect list, that'll pop up. I can type in that attendee list that we used earlier. We can search, instead of from the 5 million individuals we have profiled, it's the people on the list. In terms of politics and kind of whether or not someone's conservative or left-leaning, I had a client actually that came up with a good idea. I think this was actually in the hedge fund space, more of an activist hedge fund. And what they did was they didn't want to, look into a person that's affiliated with a politically exposed individual. So they loaded in an external politically exposed persons list and then pathed to it to see if they have some sort of connection there. So this is great to see if there's any influence that they weren't aware of. Hey, you have a RelSci saying that this person has a direct connection to so-and-so. Would you mind explaining that? Is this really a valid connection, or maybe not so much? So yeah, the meeting did start. Actually, it started back, excuse me, at 1 p.m. Eastern till 2:30. But it's one of those types of webinars where it's still useful if you pop in and out. I just kind of answer some historical questions, Trevor, so don't worry about it. And I'm also recording it currently. So whatever you missed, you can always catch up on later when I post it to our YouTube channel. And I think, I can have Tower send that out as well. All right, so, this is a great question, actually, and kind of talking about alerts, which is another topic that people were interested in. So I come in here, click the home page for alerts, and what a lot of people aren't aware of is how powerful alerts can be. And I like to push, this is probably my second favorite thing to push, after lists. So number one, you can do spot searches. So let's say a lot of people are familiar with getting alerts on relationships or on a prospect list. And for anyone that isn't, how to do that, for instance, I come into, let's say, the attendee list. And there's this alerts on option here. So if it's no alerts are on, it'll be gray. Just click it and alerts are automatically on. You can turn them off individually. So maybe, come through here if it's a 100-person list and, let's say maybe you have the custom field before. So whether or not they're attending, whether or not they've responded. And as you go down the list, you turn off alerts for people that said no or haven't responded. And that way you can kind of stay smart on those individuals. Or, reduce the amount of alerts that you're getting on your attendee list if they're not actually going to be attending. And this works for prospecting list as well. But those are the two ways most people are aware of getting alerts. So my relationships or lists. But in this case, the question is, how can I find companies that have had news stories written about them regarding green energy? And the best way to do that is come down here and click Advanced Search. For most everyone, this will not be a long scroll because you don't have that many alerts. In my case, I have a lot of alerts. So if we scroll on back up, we'll actually get to the Advanced Search feature. So Advanced Search allows you to do spot searches for anything you want. So maybe I'm just looking for any organization, any industry, and I just want, do we have a topic? Let's see, topic of green. No, we have no green energy here. No charitable cause. No green energy there. So what we can do, in this instance, there's actually green energy. As an example, click search. So this will be keyword search for green energy. And this can actually be very, very useful for power searches and for alert searches if we don't have something kind of profiled or we don't have something labeled or tagged. Very useful. You get very specific results. In this case, it looks like, okay, Atomic City, USA, Millionaires Enclave. If we pop up this article, why did green energy come up for this? That's why. So it's actually mentioned in the article. If we want to get more specific, we can keep green energy, and maybe if we're just interested in some of the top companies, we can type in Fortune 500, for instance, and select the Fortune 500 and see, what companies of the Fortune 500 are involved in green energy initiatives. And take a look. And you can, play around the keywords, do phrasing, make it a one phrase, make it 2 individual words. But what you can do here also is create very, very granular alerts. So let's say you're a wealth manager or you're a nonprofit. And, excuse me, misclick. And let's say you're looking for individuals. So you type in, you have a prospect list or, maybe a large list. You type it in here. And if we scroll down, let's say we pick the 2016 prospect. A good question, Tasha. So this is asking about the questions like some of the standard lists you may see actually in this account. So if you scroll down, some of these are obviously lists that I've created, but other ones are not. The Forbes 400, the Forbes Billionaires list, for instance, World Economic Forum attendees, things of that nature. Those are available to all of our clients. So I think we have a list or a file of 80 to 90 standard lists. Some are useful for others, and some are not so useful depending on what segment you are. Just ask Tara to, or I can even ask Tara, and I'll write it down right now, to shoot you the file. And you can select what lists you want, and we can upload them into your file on your behalf. And as I've mentioned earlier, no additional cost is included. So, we're going to go through the prospect list, and if you just clicked alerts on this prospect list, right, like in the actual list section, you'd get a lot of alerts. You'd kind of almost be spammed with alerts depending how large the list is. Some people like this. Some people like to get as many alerts as possible. Other people are not so lenient. So what you can do is come through here and say, okay, I want to filter down by topic. I'm just interested in donations and philanthropy, employment and board changes. Maybe come down and say maybe insider transactions, whether or not they've come into money recently, or maybe don't have as much liquid funds lying around. Click search. And now it's much more granular. Now we come down here, we take a look at specific articles that have some relation to our prospect list. And what you can do is click Save as Alert Source, name it if you wish, and click Save. And now you have a whole individual, specific, and separate alert source for this topic. So you don't just have to, go and get alerts on everything about the prospect list. You can just get on what you want. And in terms of getting even more specific, if you click your name and select My Alert Settings, and Tara very well may have actually covered this in her tips and trick webinar, you can choose what you want alerts on. So maybe just my relationships. Maybe I do want to get alerts for the attendee list, maybe the board relationships. Okay, this is fantastic. Maybe a save search, an industry. Not so interested in the charitable causes right now. And then here are some of the custom sources that I've done. But you can also do the filtering for a list, just here, or maybe on relationships, just by clicking the filter button here and drill down. Great use case. But what a lot of people aren't aware of is email settings are what make alerts very powerful too. So let's say you want a lot of, as much information and articles on your prospect lists and your portfolios and target companies and your relationships as you want on the homepage of RelSci or on the mobile app. That's great. Do that. But let's say for the email, you're getting sick of the spam. What you can do is you can come in here and say, hey, I don't want a daily alert. I want a weekly one, for instance. That's what some people do. But then what they do is they can come in here and actually say, I just really want to be notified of my relationships and the attendee list. We have an event coming up in a month. I want to stay smart on those individuals. You will only receive alerts in your email about these two sources of alerts. However, the home page will still remain the same. If I come back here, these sources are still yellow. which means I'm still getting alerts on the homepage and on the mobile app about these, but I'm only getting email alerts about these two. That's excellent. That's very useful. Just came back. All right, so another big thing you can do here is, let's say you're a portfolio manager or prospect manager, or the admin to multiple wealth managers, and you want to be able to send relevant information to those individuals about their portfolios, about their prospects, maybe their relationships. But what you've been finding is, I've loaded in 5 or 10 of their portfolios, but I get one email with all of the alerts about them, and it's a pain. I can't really do anything with it. I have to go through it and take information out. Change the format. So if you change this from combined to individual, what this means, as the little dot says, it will receive a separate email for each selected source. So let's say all of these are portfolios for individual portfolio managers or individual wealth managers. We turn this on and change that to individual. You'll now receive, instead of one email, you'll receive 8 emails. And then what you can easily do is forward it along to the corresponding prospect manager, gift officer, wealth manager. Great use case there. All right, so I'm going to pick out another question. Okay, this one's more on the simple side, but it's useful to know. So this comes from Michael. We loaded all of our clients in a list, but I just want to find the CEOs of those companies. Can I do that in RelSci? Yes, very easily. Come into Power Search. In the Appears On field, type in the list that you wish to go through. So for this in this instance, if it's a list of individuals, type it in the Appears On field. So I could type in my prospect list here, fine, for instance, as long as it was all individuals, and then select role here and do CEO, and that would work perfectly fine. It'll take a look at all the prospects, all these individuals we have, and look for CEOs from those. However, if you have a list of foundations or executives, corporations, and you want to find the CEOs of those companies, do not put the list of companies in the Appears On field. And I'll explain why not. So if you were to put the list of companies in the Appears On field, what RelSci is doing, if I put the Fortune 500 here, what RelSci is doing is it's saying, okay, hey, Fortune 500 list, we're going to take all those companies and we're going to create a list of individuals. Like, okay, take everyone here, all of these thousands upon hundreds of thousands of individuals. And then what it's saying is pull up all these CEOs from those lists of individuals that are affiliated with the Fortune 500. But that's not what you're after. You don't want to see if, a senior vice president is a CEO of a small startup or is, a board member over in a small nonprofit. That's not what you're getting at. What you want to do here is don't put the Fortune 500 there. Put it here. So who are at? And you can do an organization or you can do a list. So now it's saying, show me all the CEOs that work, that are in the Fortune 500. So in this case, the CEOs of the Fortune 500, instead of CEOs who are just somewhat related to the Fortune 500. Hopefully that's clear. And as I mentioned earlier, if you do have to drop off, this webinar is till 2:30, but if you have to drop off, feel free. It's recorded, and plus it's kind of one of those pop-in, pop-out webinars. So this is a thing that confuses a lot of people. So they'll pull up, for instance, the Fortune 500 here, and then they're not getting the right results. and it confuses them entirely. You might get like, oh, there's 800 CEOs at the Fortune 500. No, this is, that's not correct. That's why. That's why that happens. This is how you go about doing it. Another thing that's very interesting is keyword. I've been mentioning it earlier, but keyword is a great solution to a few things. For instance, a legal client actually had a whole group, a whole BD team, I think of 4 or 5 individuals, that one of their responsibilities, projects they worked on, was for I don't even know how many hours a week. They'd track where the chief legal officers and the general counsels of companies were going, if they were leaving jobs, what their employment and board changes were like. They used employment and board change to actually track that with RelSci, freed up this team's time, and they got to pursue other things. Now, in regards to keyword, let's say you want to look up a specific role. Let's say, okay, chief legal officer. I want to pull up chief legal. Well, we don't have chief legal officer. We have chief legal professional, but that's not what we want. We want officer. So what you can do is actually just make it a keyword and say, okay, I want to look at all the CLOs, that are currently at a company. And we'll pull up those individuals. So we might have the actual position, the phrase written in RelSci. We just haven't created a type for it yet, if you will. So in this case, there's 1,691. We can't create a specific predefined role for every role out there. That'd be a little too ridiculous. But you can use a keyword, and the results still pop up. So corporate general counsel, chief legal officer, it'll pull up the correct information. Okay, so actually this is a good question. So Tasha was asking in regards to the Fortune 500 list, is this a static list, or do we update these lists for you as the years go by? So this currently is a static list. So if it's the 2015 Fortune 500 usually doesn't happen with, but let's say it's 2015 Forbes 400, it will not change. It will not update, and will not update it for you. Multiple reasons, limited resources, lots of lists people want created. So we might have new lists for you to upload that we haven't had before, Crane's lists. We even have some from Europe and from East Asia. But we don't update them for every client either, because a lot of clients have them. Take a very long time. However, if you email Tara or email client support, we'd be happy to update it for you. So in this case, for instance, we have the Forbes Billionaires list 2015. Now we have the 2016 version. If clients want the updated version, they just shoot us an email, and we can do that for them. But yeah, it's not an automatic process. RelSci, the platform itself, is not updating that. That's something that we over here at RelSci, we or Tara usually create that list and then upload it for you. All right, so some other questions. And if anyone has specific questions about a tool or a use case you want to discuss, just let me know. Right in the feel free to write in the questions, and I'll answer it for you. So this one's actually kind of an advanced question that goes off kind of what we've been discussing. This comes from Shailene, and she's looking for wealthy individuals that have recently come into additional cash. I see insider transactions in my newsfeed. Can I search on demand for people in a certain location that have sold stock recently? Yes, you can. And there's a few ways to go about doing this. So come into Power Search. You can drill down by location. So we'll do Philadelphia, for instance. And we open up Insider Transaction. And this is very useful information if you are a wealth manager or a nonprofit. So as you well know, we don't have a field in Power Search that has net worth. We do have compensation, investments in public holdings, but Insider Transaction is also a very useful one. what you can do is I just want to see if someone's sold in the last, let's say, 60 days, $10,000 worth of stock. Search. So this is useful to pull up if anyone has some liquid assets or liquid funds that they've come into recently that you can target. As long as Power Search cooperates with me, I'll show you how you can go from this to getting alerts on it. It looks like Power Search is not cooperating right now. I'll talk to our tech team about that. I know we do have a release today, so there will be actually an update later on tonight with some bug fixes and some functionality updates as well. This help menu is either being released tonight or, as I mentioned, next week, so keep an eye out for that. This is a good question. It comes from Liz. It's a very common question we get. Is there a way to filter my relationships by last name? I just want them done alphabetically by last name. Very common question. And when you report stuff out from RelSci, as many of you are aware, let's do committee members' relationships, for instance. Click report. I do a CSV. Let's say I do the top 100 here. Customize report, 3 employments. Quick download. And I open this up. So we have some information here, but as many of you are aware of, name is one field. And for some people, that's how they upload information to their CRM system. So it works fine. But other people like to be able to filter that information, whether it be in Excel or their CRM system actually doesn't take that information, but they're wondering, okay, how do I go about doing this in terms of making this into first name and last name, or first name, middle name, last name? There are 2 ways. One, you can delimit the list in Excel. Many of you are aware. So text to columns, you can do right here. However, a downside of this is that depending if a person has multiple initials or multiple names, it won't work perfectly. However, I do have a solution, personally. There are formulas online and also ones that I've created myself and Tara has access to that can pull last name for you, can pull first name. It can also create separate columns for all the initials, all the names. It is more of an advanced use case for Excel, but if you do want a list or need a list with separated names, just let Tara know and we can work out a solution. Alright, so let me just make sure that I'm covering everyone's questions. We have about 10 minutes left, so if anyone has, whether it be a very specific question, very advanced use case, or whether it be a very basic question, you're still confused about relationships, you're still confused about the difference between lists and relationships, or you want me to, extrapolate on RelWeb, please let me know. Alright, this one's actually good for for-profit users out there and for any admins. So, 2 things I'll actually cover before kind of finishing up. So I'm an administrator for a number of users. I've got one big file with the relationships listed out from our CRM system. Do I have to break this into separate files and load them into each account individually, going person by person by person for relationships, or is there a way I can do it all at once? So there's an admin page, and a lot of people aren't aware of it. It's up at the top right. Almost everyone that's a nonprofit will have access to it because you're accessing that central account. If you're on this webinar, maybe if you're for profit, you probably have access to it as well. So if you click the admin page, they'll list out the users you manage. And then if you click relationships here, you can actually click upload contacts and get a template. And what you can do is you can upload contacts for your entire firm, or the users you manage at least, with one file. So instead of, let's say you have 30 people that you're managing, or 100, and you want to load their relationships in, and you don't have one of our solutions like Contact Aggregator or an API, what you can do is create that file, create another column titled username, and make sure the username is associated with the correct contact owner, then load it in, and it does all the work for you. It assigns it to the correct person, the correct user, and the only caveats here are, number one, make sure the file is not too large. If it is, just break it down into smaller chunks. I think the largest file I've come across personally was 850 something thousand rows, so that took a lot of work on our end, but we managed. But if you have 100,000 rows, 50,000 rows, just break it into a few files and upload it that way. Other great part of it is you can just do potential matches for your entire firm, so that's useful as well. Alert settings I'll cover real fast. You can actually get email forwarding, so if someone, if they're more likely to look at an email with alerts if it comes from you internally, forward their alerts to yourself, not to them, and then forward them the alerts. Two things I'll cover: internal IDs. If you have some constituent IDs or some Salesforce ID that you want to load in and match, you can do so using this tab. If it's not enabled, just shoot Tara an email. We can enable it free of charge, of course. And then the last thing I do want to mention is, let's say I'm going to pull up our founder just as an example, but Neil Goldman. What's useful is I get a lot of questions from nonprofits specifically saying, hey, we actually have a relationship with Neil. We have a connection, but we have a connection to Neil's spouse, or we have connections to Neil's, some family member that's not profiled in RelSci. So this is totally different if, it's a Bill Gates, Melinda Gates, they're both profiled, they're both popular enough, or excuse me, not popular, both influential enough and both involved enough that we have information on them. But let's say it's, someone like Neil, for instance, or maybe a trustee or a donor, and what you want to indicate is saying, hey, we don't have access to them, but we have access to their spouse. You can do that. So there's a great trick you can do is, there's this proprietary information module here that it's enabled on a lot of people's accounts, but if yours isn't enabled, just let Tara know, as I say. So what you can do is say, hey, share note, say we have access to a spouse. If I can spell spouse correct, there we go. Choose who you want to share it with, hit save. Now when people come in here, say, oh, okay, we have access to his spouse, not him directly, that's good to know. Oh, it's also great with this module, you can take some private notes if you're prospecting, take some shared notes. This is very useful if maybe your prospect team is large enough that not everyone's on the same page, or if people are working remotely, and especially at different time zones, so they can know, hey, I already contacted this person, or better yet, we used them for an intro on, October 5th, 2016. Let's wait a few months to ask again. All right, another question. Okay, going back to the donation question. All right, so this is very specific. I'll try to answer this, and if not, Tasha, I'll talk to actually, this is more of a research question. So do you mean licensing agreements do not allow you to report out all the donations, but when we prospect based on donations, we have access to the data from a prospect standpoint versus our ability to see every donation? If I'm understanding your question correctly, I believe so. So I think there is some, we can't put all of our data, I think is what the contract says, and excuse me, I may be, misspeaking, into one easy place for everyone to access, and not by, what I mean by all the data, I mean like all the donation information, not just for one individual. So I'll take a look into what limitations the donation data has on top of it in terms of what we can push to you and what type of data. And Tara will actually probably follow up with an email in regards to that limitation. But from my understanding and from what our head of research has told me and we've talked to them about, is most of the information we receive from our data vendors and that we can confirm or publicly confirm, we push to you. So it's in the system and it's available to you. What I was getting at before is for-profits, we don't push everything to them because some of it hasn't been what we call linked. And what you'll notice is there's some donations for individuals saying, hey, this person was involved in a donation of $5,000, but it won't say who it was to. That's an unlinked donation. That's a limitation on us saying, hey, we don't know what this donation was for or what cause, but we know it happened. We're still working on connecting it to an organization. That's kind of what I was getting at in terms of some limitations there. I mean, I'm pretty sure that we've removed a lot of the limitations that we used to have. But what I will say is I'll follow up with our research team. Either myself or Tara will reach out via phone or via email and kind of give you a rundown of our donation information policy. I know a lot of our data comes from iWave, which I know a lot of our nonprofit clients use or have used in the past. All right, so it's coming up on 2:30. It's been a pleasure. I hope everything was valuable. If you have some feedback, just let me know. Let Tara know. We can maybe do this again if it was useful. I have quite the plethora of questions, historical as well as current client questions that we can always go over too. If you have specific questions, you can always shoot them to Tara. You can ask Tara to shoot them on over to me. Maybe I can hop on the phone with you. But I'll stick around for a couple more minutes. Maybe 2:30, 2:32, 2:33, if you have any other questions you want to ask at the end. And also, I'll be uploading this whole, webinar to YouTube. I probably won't be there until tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. It sometimes takes a while to go through that whole process. YouTube does not cooperate with me most of the time, but I think Tara will send it out to everyone, or I'll let her know to send it out to everyone afterwards. So thank you, everyone.